Hello, this is Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Robert Carrington of Newrange Gold. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Peter. How are you doing today?
Oh, fairly well. It would seem chaos in the markets, though, to some degree. Looking at stock price of Newrange trading below 20 cents, you have to wonder, have the wheels come off?
No, not at all. Actually, things are very positive. We've had some tremendous drill results, identified a very large extension of the mineralization there at Pamlico. And it's a lot of the reaction in the market, I think, is largely just due to the summer doldrums.
It's very illiquid out there, very thin. A little bit of selling or a lot of selling can have a big impact.
Well, it can, and summer's never a real good time to come out with a press release, but we needed to get this information out into the market. We've been fighting with the labs to get the information for well over a month now, and it's unfortunate, but it is what it is, and it's very good positive results really. If you
Yeah.
look at the tremendous extent and the increases, a 400% increase on strike length is a major increase, and we increased both the width of the mineralized corridor and the prospective depth of mineralization as well.
Well, and kudos to you for another well-crafted and well-laid out, very readable and informative news release. The quality of the material that you guys have been publishing since I've been following you, very high quality, amongst best in the industry from what I've seen.
Oh, thank you. We've all been at this more than a few years.
Well, and sorry to see you get skunked at Tom's Hammer there. No significant results obtained, 7 holes, 700 meters. Glad it wasn't a larger campaign, I guess. Any comment on that? And, having been at this for a while and the challenges that nature throws.
Yeah, it was disappointing, but the reality of it is that's exploration. Tom's Hammer is only one of several gold targets, mineralized gold areas in the sediment-hosted system over there. We're not planning any additional work on Tom's Hammer, and so we're focused on the volcanic-hosted mineralization in Pamlico Ridge, and then, as the press release indicated, in Gold Box Canyon.
Right.
It was a little bit disappointing, but that carbonate replacement style mineralization that dominates at Tom's Hammer tends to be very spotty and pockety, and so it was worth exploring. We explored it. We figured out that it wasn't worth doing any more work on it, and so we're not going to. But
Yep.
That's the thing, to go back and try and beat a dead cat to death isn't going to get anything for anybody. So we're going to focus where we know we are going to have some success.
Well, and Pamlico Ridge is a screaming target if there ever was one, I think.
Yes.
And in that news release, maybe if we could...
a very large, very promising target, and the parallel Gold Box Canyon target is equally as promising. There's multiple high-grade surface samples there, extensive underground workings, and interestingly, over in Gold Box Canyon, we see at least one major structure that seems to have a much higher silver content. Also, the silver mineralization starts to pick up over there in addition to the gold. So that'll be an interesting exploration target going forward.
Possible different zonation of the same system, or maybe something else happening?
I believe what we're looking at is a system zonation, whereas we are seeing cooler fluids. Typically, the gold is focused in the hotter temperature fluid flow, and as you start getting distally to a part of a system, you'll see the silver grades start to pick up, because silver is stable in lower temperature fluid. It will, we'll see the silver start to pick up, and in fact, that's what we start to see in the far east area of Gold Box Canyon. But that if you look at it, that's a half a mile away from the Pamlico Ridge Zone. So
Yeah.
basically, it's highly likely we are seeing a system-wide temperature-related zonation.
This is good. The scale of things here. This has got to be raising some eyebrows of people who know what that could mean.
Yeah, very definitely. Because, if you look at most of the major ore bodies in, certainly in Nevada, most of your gold ore bodies typically are less than 500 feet wide and less than 1,500 feet long. So the scale of things at Pamlico has potential to host many times that.
Yes, and again, that's the increase that you mentioned as one of the headline numbers, really, from this release. That 400% increase, very impressive, striking numbers there. Keen to talk in detail with you about that, but maybe before we go there, if I could ask about planned program for second half of 2018, included at the end of the release here today, and arguably some of the most important information for the people who are trying to look around the corner and see what is coming next.
Yeah, for the remainder of 2018, the second half of 2018 here, we're going to be continuing and expanding the underground surveying, mapping, and sampling programs that we have underway already. There are many miles more of underground workings than we have maps for in the Pamlico Ridge area. If you look at the geologic map, there's an area of that's outlined that shows the most intense historic mining. And there are sublevels that we have found our ways into that have absolutely no historic maps, big internal shafts and big internal winzes that access underground workings. And it's very important, both from a modeling perspective, to get those mapped properly. And then the sampling those, we're going to wind up with enough sampling density in there. We'll be able to start modeling a very accurate picture of exactly how the fluid flow and the system is coming together in and around those underground mine workings. And it may, in fact, be possible to have enough sampling density to estimate a resource at some point in the future, just based strictly on the underground sampling, because the levels are close enough together and well enough distributed that all things being equal, I think we'll be able to start estimating some volumes and grades in there in the future.
Yep.
We're planning on drill testing that area. So additionally, if we're going to drill test that, we want to know where the workings are so we don't break into workings, because you typically lose 15 to 20 feet of sample after you go through a mine working. Mm-hmm. And of course, the area closest to the mine working is where you're most likely to have some remaining high-grade mineralization. So we want to be able to get as accurate a picture as possible. And for any volume or resource estimate, you need to know how much of the rock has been removed by historic mining, so you can deduct that from your resource estimate accurately.
Yep, absolutely.
We're also going to be exploring this newly discovered rhyolite sediment package in the vicinity of Pamlico Ridge, where we've already demonstrated there is significant gold mineralization in a previously unknown favorable host rock. So that really opens up the tremendous potential for Pamlico, because one of the things that we were really trying to demonstrate is that this gold mineralization wasn't restricted to just that latite unit that we had sampled in the decline and sampled with our 2017 drilling. And all of a sudden, we now have significant, up to 80-meter intercepts of very significant mineralization in this other lithologic package. So that's very promising going forward.
Hole number 44.
Yeah.
Great.
44 and 47 tapped into that.
Wonderful.
And those two holes are extremely important because they were drilled in a scissor pattern where they are drilled back across each other, as people can see from the cross section AA prime, and that demonstrates that it's not just a narrow fracture related mineralized system that the drill hole drilled down. It's, you can see if you connect the dots on those drill holes, there's actually some very substantial width and depth to that. So it starts to develop some really serious big ounce potential in there.
Yep.
And of course, as we go forward, we're mapping and sampling in the Gold Box Canyon area. We're going to generate and drill targets in there. I'm confident we'll have some excellent drill targets over there in Gold Box Canyon. There's some incredible surface alteration that we're seeing, and extensive underground mine workings, and some very high grade surface samples. Some surface samples with grades as high as 90 grams a metric ton. Very, very similar host rocks, very similar alteration to what we're seeing at Pamlico Ridge.
The name Gold Box makes sense with numbers like that.
Yeah. Yes, that it does. And it's almost exactly the same geologic environment that we see in the Merritt area and Pamlico Ridge. Yep. And in fact, there's a very good possibility it's actually part and parcel of the same system. There's a big area in between that's covered with volcanic rocks that we believe are some of the same volcanic rocks that cover Pamlico Ridge. And if that's the case, then there may be potential for mineralization to extend all the way between Pamlico Ridge over into the Gold Box Canyon area.
And if that mineralization is associated with these faults, as seems to be indicated by that section AA prime in the release today, with holes 44, 47, any sense of mapping those faults and kind of using those as a guide to test that idea?
Well, there certainly is, but Matt, one of the things about some of those faults, not all of those faults penetrate the upper volcanic units that cover some of these ridges.
Of course, yeah.
And so you have to have the right rocks exposed at the surface to be able to even see the faults. There are some of the volcanic units that actually are, some are much younger than mineralization. Some of them, the faults just didn't extend up into the overlying volcanic rocks. They actually get broken up and bleed out into the contact zones. And in fact, it's that fracturing along the contact zones where those faults kind of splay out that leads to some of these great big intercepts of disseminated mineralization.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. And sorry, but just to ask that question again, any deep penetrating radar or any kind of deep looking geophysics type stuff you might use at some point to try to track those faults and see, which ones are hidden beneath the volcanics there and all of that?
The most likely would be very detailed high resolution IP resistivity, induced polarization and resistivity. Geophysical consultants I've spoken with think there might be enough trace sulfides left in some of the zones to be able to see those. It's, certainly at some point in the future it's worth a shot, but other than that, there really aren't too many remote sensing or geophysical techniques that would give us good definition of targets in that intensely oxidized zone, say between the surface and 300 meter depth.
Well, and what about greater depth than that too, right? Because that's some of the excitement of this new release is what's happening at depth there.
Yeah. that's one of the things. Geophysics are commonly limited to how deep they can see. IP might be able to penetrate down below that 300-meter interface between the oxide and sulfides. That's something that well, number one, a good geophysicist can help with, and we just need to do an orientation survey to see if we can actually pick up the sulfide through that thick of an oxide cover. 300 meters is really deep, and that's getting down there to where it's difficult to get adequate resolution to be able to target anything.
Yep,
other than just drilling. Now, there are some downhole geophysical techniques that might be able to help once we get drill holes into some of the mineralized systems within the sulfide zone. You can do downhole EM, downhole IP, a lot of things like that. But it's a lot of that really hinges on getting a drill hole into mineralization in the sulfide zone.
Well, grateful for the surface showings and the old historic workings then to give you a boost or a step along that towards that goal.
Well, it really is. And the reality of it is, I think we have enough target potential in the oxide zone to develop a multi-million ounce system. It, certainly if you look at the dimensions that we discuss in this press release, there's adequate room in there at the grades that we have intersected even in our most recent drilling to come up with a million ounce or more target in there.
And the oxide domain that you mentioned, is there anything new in regards to these results? The size of the scale of that part of the system here that
if anything, what's come out of this drilling is that the oxidation is the shallowest we've seen the redox boundary, the boundary between the oxidation and the sulfide zones, is about 200 meters. Most of the drill holes that we have, that redox boundary is closer to 300 meters.
Wow.
So the oxidation is extremely deep. It seems to be uniformly deep across the entire property. We even saw that at Tom's Hammer. 100% of everything we drilled at Tom's Hammer was oxidized.
So do you have many holes into the fresh rock and the fresh mineralization, really?
No, we have only the deep stratigraphic holes are into the sulfides, and so far we haven't we just haven't intersected any receptive host rocks where we have proper structural preparation.
Yep.
And that's it's maybe unfortunate, but that's really just the way it is at this point. Typically you have to have holes that are far more than 300 meters to really get into the sulfides. And if you look at our drilling, I think we only have 3 holes that are more than 300 meters deep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I wonder if it's fair to say that you're kind of scratching at the surface still here then.
Well, in a lot of ways we really are, but we're also focusing on where we're having the best exploration success, which is in the near surface oxide zones, which that implies that we're potentially looking at open pittable, heap leachable type mineralization.
And to that, I don't see any mention in this release about MET testing, bulk sampling, anything like that. There's been some prior mention of that. Is that still on the plans?
It's ongoing. Right now we have the cyanide shakes being or in process, and we just haven't. Those results will take a while to all get first get the numbers back from the laboratories, and then we have to get them compiled and analyzed and figure out what they actually mean relative to the assays that we have for the drill holes.
Wonderful.
But I personally would be very surprised if we didn't get very good extraction on the cyanide shakes, because cyanide shakes are typically done on pulverized material, which these are being, and so you have very finely ground material, and where it's oxide like this, I can't imagine that it won't we won't see very good promising results. Once we get those cyanide shake assays, then we'll more than likely move on into bottle rolls and ultimately into column leach tests.
Well,
and the column leach tests are where you really start getting the information that's going to tell you what the amenability of this system is likely to be to a heap leach environment.
Yeah. And again, to those people who know what those results could mean down the line, potentially very, very exciting stuff. Talking with you before about whole ore or whole run of mine, break of mine material going onto the heap leach there, potentially. Hearing about that, potentially even with this testing to get some results back on that maybe, and the implications for OPEX and everything there, potential mining scenario. Shocking stuff.
Well, it really is, because, if this deposit, and most deposits are not amenable to run of mine or break of mine leaching.
Yeah.
But for those that are, it's a tremendous benefit. The CapEx is reduced substantially because you don't have to worry about crushing circuits at all. It's basically you shoot it in the pit and then you put it on a leach pad. And from an operating standpoint, you don't have all the double handling and all the operating expenses associated with crushing.
Let alone the agglomeration circuit to follow it or anything like that.
Yeah. No, for those deposits that are amenable to break a mine or run a mine leaching, your all-in sustaining costs typically come in the lower quartile of all the operating mines.
Yeah, that's where you want to be. And if you can couple some high grade with that as well, we're talking lower decile.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah, very, very much a forward-looking statement on anything like that, I'm sure. But
it is, isn't it? But that's why we do all the metallurgy. I can have all the ideas in the world, but that metallurgical work that we just discussed is what's going to tell us if all my ideas are going to bear any fruit or not.
Well, and it's tough because those are the kind of results that associated with development stage work in that orphan period where, the junior mining speculators who chase exploration and discovery have abandoned, moved on. And it's kind of too early for the institutional players who come in to really finance development. That orphan period where a stock can kind of languish when they're producing those really, really important technical engineering results, make it or break it results, really. It's funny to see that, to see you working on that stuff at the same time as you also have discovery and exploration, genuine activity going on.
A lot of companies don't do it, but as both an engineer and a geologist, I like to know what my metallurgy is probably going to be early in the game, because it may well affect how I manage my exploration going forward. Because
certainly
in the event that you have a project with metallurgical challenges, you may in fact have to look at a much higher cutoff than what a deposit without the same metallurgical challenges has.
Yep.
So, for a deposit with extremely good metallurgy, everything going in its favor, you might be able to look at say a 0.1 gram cutoff. If you start having a lot of metallurgical challenges, you may have to look at a 0.5 gram or a 1 gram cutoff.
Yeah, and that has big implications for even how you would explore for it, really. You know, if it, depending if there's some zonation again or different characteristics of the deposit in different areas of it, yeah, you're going to focus on different aspects, building up the most economic tonnage the quickest.
Yeah, you know, there are some deposits in Nevada that are operating. Some of the Carlin type deposits are operating with a 7.5 gram cutoff.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, no, it's
in Nevada of all, and with Carlin style too. That seems just unheard of.
well, where you get a deposit that has preg robbing carbon or sulfide encapsulation of the gold.
Yeah, yeah.
All of a sudden, your operating parameters are such, and your metallurgical recoveries are adversely impacted. All of a sudden, you have to go with a much higher cutoff, and there are a few deposits where they're actually operating with a 7.5 gram cutoff.
Yeah. And any sense of, with the drilling that you have here, how much of the deposits and how much of your drilling and stuff like that, you know, is that any number like that? Is that even a useful number to try to bring to Pamlico at this point?
You mean the cutoff?
Yeah, such a high grade cutoff like that, you know, it's
really not, because we don't have any preg robbing carbon. We don't have an issue with silica encapsulation, and so I don't think there's really any particular use for an extremely high cutoff like that. If you were looking at a selective high-grade underground operation, you'd probably want to look at something between a 2.5 and a 3.5 gram cutoff, just because of the costs associated with underground mining. But in an open pit scenario, if you look around Nevada, there are a number of open pits, typically in volcanic-hosted systems, much like Pamlico, that are operating with a 0.1 gram and, in some cases, perhaps even lower cutoffs.
Well, and for anyone listening who doesn't quite follow all the things we're talking about here, they may, you know, recognize that idea of the mining industry picking the low-hanging fruit and the need for explorationists to be going out the risk curve and finding things that are harder. And I would just point out again that Pamlico was held privately for decades and decades and decades here, a century, I believe. And that really kept it away from past market cycles and all this, and puts it as an example of something that really bucks that trend of harder deposits. And based on, you know, what you're finding here and what may come from the met testing, it may prove to be something that turns out to be actually a quite easy deposit in the end, which would be very favorable.
Yeah, metallurgically, I think Pamlico will be relatively simple. Now, Nevada gold deposits are typically not all that easy to explore. You know, Nevada, one of the reasons Nevada is one of the world's largest gold producers is because the geology in Nevada is incredibly complex. You know, Nevada has been affected by multiple major geologic orogenies where you have faulting going in every which direction, and especially the Walker Lane is dominated by major ongoing faulting that is still active today. And in the case of Pamlico, we see the northwest-oriented fault structures related to the Walker Lane, which the Walker Lane is a great big northwest trending shear zone up to 75 miles wide. And other deposits associated with the Walker Lane include the Corvus deposit down near Beatty, Nevada, Northern Empire's deposit south of Beatty at the Sterling Mine, Gold Reserve is putting the Isabel Pearl into Nevada. That's just about 35 kilometers south of Pamlico. So there's a number of operating deposits that juniors are currently working on. And then, of course, you have the giant Round Mountain mine that Kinross is operating, and that has over 30 million ounces of past production plus current resources. So, you know, big gold deposits, and the reason that they're there is they're all contained within this tremendously complex structural regime where you have a lot of fracturing, a lot of structural preparation, and gold fluids can come up into these receptive environments very easily.
Yeah. Wonderful. And to rewind and go back again to the start of this news release today, 400% increase, prospective high-grade vein and disseminated gold targets. That statement, can we cross-reference that with the drill hole location and geologic map that you released today?
Yes.
So
yeah,
is it
the drill hole map? If you look at the extent of the area that we drilled in our phase 1 and phase 2 drilling, this drilling indicates a more than 400% extent or increase in the strike length of the mineralized system along Pamlico Ridge from the Merritt area, and we've increased the width, the apparent width of the mineralized corridor by around 260%, and the depth by roughly the same amount. And so overall, the overall target potential there is far more than 400% increase.
Yeah. And in that 2017 drilling that kind of focused on the end of the decline, the K zone, the J zone, all these different zones that we had marked out there, those kind of went off in a southeasterly direction. It seems like we're 44, hole 46, 47 here. These are kind of a bit offset to the southwest of that and not quite testing those same zones as before. So is it fair to say that there's still potential to test for the continuation of those zones from the 2017 drilling?
Well, there definitely is potential to test for those. Whether these holes actually tested extensions of those, like the J zone and the K zone, all that, will remain to be seen. That's going to require more drilling, more testing.
Yeah.
It is definitely part of the same overall package. You know, it's part of the same northwest trending system, and within the greater northwest trending structural package, you have to remember that you have internal structures in there that range anywhere from almost north-south to about north 40 degrees west. And oftentimes these are mutually offsetting and very, very complex shear systems.
Wow.
So we'll just, you know, as we move forward, the more and more drilling we get into this, the better picture we're going to have of it.
Yeah.
Right now, we see mineralization extending over a half a kilometer strike length, and so it, you know, I don't know if your listeners will necessarily understand what an echelon gash system is, but you can actually have faults that are forming. You have master faults that may be related to the northwest trending Walker Lane, and within that you get faults coming off at acute angles that can also be very highly mineralized. So we may be, and it appears that we are dealing with that kind of a system, and it's very common in the Walker Lane to see that, where you get these horsetail or gash veins that are also mineralized. So you can wind up with apparent differences in strike that are still really controlled by the major north trending features.
Oh, what a puzzle!
It is. It's quite a puzzle. One of the things, just for a scale and geometry, when you start drilling on a project like this, I actually worked the scale and geometry out one time when I was drilling on the Comstock lode years ago. And with these 1,000-foot deep holes, it's similar to sitting on the roof of a two-story house, taping soda straws together, trying to hit a dollar bill on the ground with your eyes closed in a mild wind.
Yep, certainly. Well, and I noticed a couple holes, one hole lost, a rod being stuck as well. So sometimes it's more than a gentle wind too. It can be a pretty strong wind blowing.
It is the intense degree of fracturing at Pamlico. The very thing that gives Pamlico the tremendous target potential also leads to extremely difficult drilling. That broken rock is difficult to drill, and commonly it has a bad habit of caving in. And of course, the rock fragments, once they wedge in behind the drill bit, are just like a giant pipe wrench grabbing a hold of the drill steel.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get the drill steel freed up. And in fact, every single one of these holes, all 7 holes, the drill was stuck multiple times in each hole, and in that one hole, we actually lost 500 feet of drill pipe.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Yeah, that's got to be frustrating.
Very, because that was an important hole that we were hoping to go much deeper on, and we couldn't.
Yeah, and that was 40. Was that 42, 43 down to the southeast there that we were trying to continue to step out, or was that 45? That was off.
44. Well, actually, 42, 43, and even 44 was intended to go deeper than it did, but we got mineralization in that. But we were attempting to target even deeper mineralization.
Yeah.
45 was the one we lost the rods in, but we had incredible drilling challenges on all of the holes. The only hole that actually got, well, the 2 holes that got to target depth were holes 41 and 47.
And 41 was, yeah, I wondered about that. Can we speak briefly about that section BB prime there off to the southeast? I was wondering, what's the concept with 41 and success, failure? Any thoughts?
Well, the success, actually, even 41 was supposed to go somewhat deeper. We were trying to target that large fault zone that you see on the right-hand side of the section. Yep. The idea was to try and target that large fault zone. But we had been stuck multiple times in the hole and fought it down to 1150, and the drillers just finally couldn't go any further. But we did hit good mineralization at the competency contrast between the latite rhyolite and that semi-massive rhyolite that you see cutting through the middle of that section.
Mm-hmm. Which is pretty much the standard model that you've seen, since the Merritt decline.
It is, yeah. That's the classic model that has evolved, and it seems to be holding true with the drilling we're doing to date.
And was there really only one interval of rhyolite that you encountered in that hole 41?
There only one large interval at a scale that's really too small to show on the cross section. There are much smaller, relatively insignificant interbeds of rhyolite, sometimes only a couple of feet thick, less than 5 feet thick. So it's volcanic systems. You can imagine where you have a very active volcano with explosive volcanism going on, much like St. Helens, but doing it repeatedly, time after time. You wind up with, some real thick beds. You wind up with little tiny thin units, and sometimes the thinner units can be very discontinuous.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we have that latite rhyolite, because it's dominantly latite, but we periodically see thin interbeds of rhyolite in there.
So does that frustrate future plans to do more drilling down there, or change of plan of attack? I believe that's kind of over in the east-west zone, not far from the east-west zone area.
We're just where hole 41 was drilled. We're just a couple of 100 meters north of the east-west zone. It really doesn't change things. It's just the drillers are going to have to be aware that this is tough drilling, and we need to be ready for it.
Good.
Yep. It may mean that we have a lot of drill holes that don't reach target depths, but that's the way it is. We may have better luck with core. The problem with core is you also stand a much higher chance of washing away the very soft, friable oxide-hosted mineralization that we see at Pamlico.
Yeah.
And that's really the main reason we've been focused on drilling the RC. We stand a much better chance of recovering that soft, friable mineralization.
Well, and I recall that your drilling costs in the 2017 campaign were lowest quartile, I believe, as well, right?
Yeah.
So if there are some lost holes here and there, and the costs associated with that, it's frustrated. But maybe that just puts you more in line with some of the peer group, and isn't a deal killer in any way.
Oh, by no means. We're still probably in the even with the drilling difficulties we had and the pipe we lost, we're still probably in the lower quartile.
Great.
We may be at the upper part of the lower quartile now instead of down in the lower part, but it's still our drilling costs are still quite reasonable.
And maybe just to step back and to think about what you were saying in regards to the structural complexity in the area and the kind of echelon vein faulting and stuff like that. How much do you think the underground inspection of the old workings and the projections of the veins that you identify underground, how much can that be frustrated by the complexity of the setting?
Well, actually, it won't really be frustrated. Getting good, detailed, accurate maps of as much of the underground as we can possibly get into will clarify the model considerably, because it will give us very important information on exactly which structures, which orientations are mineralized in detail, what the bounding structures are and what the controls are, and what vectors are important for the mineralization going forward.
Yep. Understood. A busy day. I appreciate your time. I know there's lots of people trying to get your attention with all the significant developments going on and the attention to the company here with news out. Anything else we should speak to here? Maybe that section of AA.
The map and the sections. One thing that I think is really important is this mineralization is still open-ended, along strike. Haven't completely closed it off even on width or depth.
Yeah.
So, there's still a lot more to come from Pamlico. But moving along, we've now got drill holes over 500 meters of a 4.5 kilometer long target zone.
Yes.
So, there's a lot more.
Yep, this is good progress, and it's good to see you focusing in Merritt area, the Pamlico Ridge. This seems like Gold Box Canyon there. It seems like the heart of the project area.
It really does. I think this is probably where some of the higher fluid flow temperatures are, and obviously where a lot of gold has been deposited.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Robert
So,
Carrington, Newrange Gold, thank you very much.
Peter, thank you for your time. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.